Kevin Bernat. I'm going to talk a little bit about Cataclysm, a game from designers Scott Muldoon and William T. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name because I'm sure I won't get it right. This is a game that is currently in playtesting and something you can look for on GMT's P500 if you're interested. It's what we would consider maybe a bridging game. It should be something that's easy for people who are comfortable with Euro games, as well as for more dedicated wargamers. That's what we might call a sandbox game, because it gives you lots of different options, lots of replayability, and it should be something new happens every game. I'm going to show you the components that we have. I'll start off with this is the Vassal module, and you can see in the game you're going to have a map of the world that's broken down into areas. So you have the Soviet Union and Europe, and China and the Pacific. For the game, there are several different scenarios. Let me show you here. So just right here, we're just showing 7 of the different scenarios that are currently in the playbook. And you'll see they run anywhere from 1 to 3 hours, usually more 1 to 2 for the introductory scenarios. And then some of the longer scenarios, including the campaign, which runs from 1933 to 1950, can run around 6 hours, give or take. And you can also see that the number of players is 2 players up to 5. In addition to the map of the world, which is divided into 7 different types of areas, in the sense that you have 6 powers or major powers, and these are the Soviet Union and the communist ideology, Germany, Italy, and Japan in the fascist ideology, and France, the United Kingdom, and the US in the democratic ideology. Unlike some games in this period, China is abstracted out and is a neutral area, which makes up the rest of the areas on the map. Powers control the areas that are in their color. So that can include their home areas. All the area that the Soviet Union controls is their home area. And also controls what we term colonies. So for France, you can see they control their home area as well as 2 colonies on the European portion of the map. And then they also control Indochina on the Pacific portion of the map. The way powers mark control of areas that are not in their color are going to be wooden cubes, and you'll get a large number of these included in the game. You'll see some currently on the map, Poland having a cube that is in the French color, which signifies that Poland has French influence. This has many game effects that we'll talk about in another video, but just suffice to know that many of the aspects or markers in the game will be marked by cubes. For example, if you notice in the Alliance box over here on the right, there's a gray colored German cube and an Italian yellow cube. They're stacked together in the Fascist Alliance circle, which signifies that these 2 powers have an alliance together. If, for example, they were to go to war with France, we would place these same cubes here in addition to a French cube, and that would signify that these 3 powers are at war. Obviously, you have 3 ideologies, so you have the communist sector, the democratic sector, and the fascist sector. In addition to the cubes, you can see there's some markers, some counters on the board. Some of these counters represent military units, others represent resources. This is a resource controlled by Germany at the start of the game. And then these are some neutral resources, and then there's neutral armies as well. Some powers have special markers to represent special abilities, Lend-Lease, the Trans-Siberian Railroad, etc. And these are sort of shown in power cards. Blow this up. So included in the game will be power cards for each power. So in this particular case, we have France and the United States. What you'll see on the power card, for all the powers essentially, is a matrix between their commitment level, civilian, rearmament, mobilization, total war, and then the effects at the different commitment level. Exhausted is a special commitment level that occurs after a power has been at total war, or if a power happens to surrender but not collapse completely. If you notice, as a power goes up in their commitment, their conversion ratio increases. That's used for a couple of different aspects in the game, and their effectiveness usually increases, except when it's dropped back down to exhausted. Finally, the home front is simply a modifier that affects how stable a country is, and as more of the economy is devoted towards war, it becomes harder for that power to stay stable. In addition, in the force pool, you'll notice they have an area where they can hold their current military, and they have what here are available markers. Markers are either special power markers, so this is a refit marker that refers to a special rule only for France and actually Italy. You have flags, which represent the political currency in the game, and you have offensive markers, and on the back of the offensive marker are resources. And this represents essentially how effective a power is at prosecuting and making war. What you'll notice if you look at the two powers, you have a force pool. So France has 21 total units. And so if you notice, all powers have the same units, but the proportions are different. You can simply see, looking at Japan versus France, there's a lot more air, a lot more surface fleets, a little bit more armies, but their subs and their logistics markers are about the same. In addition, all powers have fortresses, which essentially function as armies but gain a benefit in defense, and upgrade markers. And these markers come in terms of land, air, and sea. And the way an upgrade marker works is it allows you to convert a unit to its improved or upgraded side. So a tactical air becomes a strategic air, a surface fleet becomes a carrier fleet, and an infantry army becomes a tank army. All of the upgraded markers retain the ability of the non-upgraded side, but also usually gain some special ability and take twice as much damage to be eliminated. The other thing I want to show you in terms of the differences for the powers is you see again, France at their civilian commitment has 5 of the possible 21 French combat markers in the game. At most, they have 14 of the 21. If you look at the United States, at their civilian or lowest level, they actually have 12, and they have 48 total. And eventually they reach a proportion of 30 out of their 48. They also have a significantly larger number of offensives compared to France. And so they are a power that is much more capable and much better at prosecuting conflict, prosecuting the war. This applies to all the different powers. They all have their own blend of counters. They have their own blend of how many units are actually available at different commitment levels. They have different values of the number of flags or their political currency, and they have different values in terms of their offensive markers or their military currency. The last thing I want to talk a little bit about is the effect that this will have on gameplay, because it means one person will play at a very different style than another, and the game will support that. Maybe one person wants to have Japan build a large navy. So if you look at Japan, when they increase their commitment from civilian to rearmament, so they go from 8 to 11. So they would add 3 counters to their force pool. Well, one person may want to add 3 surface fleets. Another person may instead choose to add 2 armies and an air force. And everyone can make that choice, and how they play is going to impact how the game progresses. And you can see that all powers have this choice. Every player is going to play differently. Perhaps you might play differently from one game to the next. And Cataclysm gives you that option. It gives you that flexibility. So the last thing I want to show you is just one of the unit keys. So this is another player aid that you will get with the game. We'll have all the different units, including the units that are specialized for each individual power. So a marker that keeps track of that power stability. You have, again, I mentioned the home front marker, I mentioned the flags. You also have special markers for special abilities. So the US can develop the A-bomb or do Lend-Lease. Italy has a marker for the Abyssinian crisis, it's an event where Italy has to do a certain thing by the end of the turn, and this allows you to keep track of that. We'll talk more about resources in the video on production. The Soviet Union has posture, Trans-Siberian Railroad. Essentially, these are all the different markers that are used in the game to denote different aspects, in addition to the cubes and, of course, dice. So hopefully you enjoyed this brief summary of what the game has to offer, and hopefully you can support the game with P500 if you have not already done so, and if you have, we appreciate that, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have.